I woke up on a Tuesday morning about 3 years ago, sitting on the edge of my bed here in Scottsdale, and for a full minute I could not remember the name of my own grandson. I just sat there staring at the carpet, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. The house was quiet. The sun was already starting to bake the driveway outside, but inside I was frozen. I am 81 years old now. I was born back in Columbus, Ohio in 1944. A time when men like my father worked themselves to the bone in manufacturing plants and ignored every warning sign their bodies gave them until it was simply too late. I spent my life trying not to be that way. I spent decades working in community health education, translating medical jargon into plain English for working folks. I thought I knew how to take care of myself, but sitting on that bed, unable to pull a simple name from my own memory, I was terrified. I thought it was the end of the line. I thought this was the beginning of the cognitive decline we all whisper about when our friends start fading away. I thought it was Alzheimer's or dementia knocking on my front door. My memory had been slipping for months. I was leaving my keys in the refrigerator, losing my train of thought in the middle of sentences, and carrying around a mental fog so thick I felt like I was walking through wet concrete. I chalked it up to age. We all do that after a certain point. We assume that because the calendar pages keep turning, our minds are naturally supposed to rust and deteriorate like old machinery left out in the rain. That same afternoon, I called my daughter Laura. Laura is a registered nurse over in Phoenix. She has a sharp mind and absolutely zero patience for self-pity. I told her what happened that morning. I told her I was scared I was losing my mind. She listened to me, quiet for a long moment, and then she didn't ask me about my memory. She asked me about my sleep. I told her I slept the way an old man sleeps. I spent 8 hours in bed, but I woke up feeling like I had just worked a double shift at the stamping plant. I was tossing, turning, waking up constantly and dragging myself out of the mattress every morning completely exhausted. Laura told me something that changed the entire trajectory of my later years. She told me that the brain fog, the missing memories, the exhaustion, and even the spikes in my blood pressure were not necessarily the inevitable result of being in my late 70s at the time. They were the direct result of a brain that was never getting the chance to clean itself. She explained that during deep sleep, the brain physically shrinks just a fraction, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to wash away the toxic proteins that build up during the day. Those toxins, specifically one called beta amyloid, are exactly what clumps together in the brains of Alzheimer's patients. If you do not get deep, uninterrupted sleep, that night crew never comes in to sweep the factory floor. The scrap metal builds up, the machines jam, and you start forgetting the names of the people you love. I realized right then that I had to fix my sleep if I wanted to keep my independence. But I thought fixing my sleep meant asking my doctor for a pill or buying some expensive new mattress. It didn't. Over the next few weeks, talking with Laura and my son Daniel, who is a physical therapist up in Denver, I learned that the problem was not my body failing. The problem was the environment I was forcing my body to sleep in. My bedroom, which I thought was a sanctuary, was actually a hostile environment filled with invisible saboteurs. There were objects surrounding me every single night, things I thought were completely harmless or even helpful, that were silently destroying my biological rhythms. The body does not ask for things twice in the same way. When you ignore its need for deep rest, it does not just make you yawn. It steals your memory. It weakens your heart. It makes your joints ache. I had to completely dismantle the way I set up my bedroom. I had to remove 5 specific items from the room where I slept. And I am telling you this today because the moment I got these things out of my sleeping space, my deep sleep returned, the brain fog lifted, and I got my mind back. And you do not have to accept a foggy brain as a normal part of getting older. You just need to stop sabotaging the engine while it is trying to repair itself. The first thing I had to physically remove from my bedroom was the one thing I used to think kept me safe: my cell phone. Like most folks my age, I got a smartphone years ago to see pictures of the grandkids and keep in touch with the family. And somehow that little glass rectangle migrated from the kitchen counter all the way to my nightstand, sitting exactly 10 inches from my pillow. I convinced myself I needed it there for emergencies. What if Daniel called in the middle of the night? What if I needed to see the time? What if there was weather coming in? So I would lie in bed, the room pitch black, and I would just check it one last time before closing my eyes. I did not realize I was shining a flashlight directly into my brain's master clock. We have a biological clock inside us called the circadian rhythm. It is like the foreman of a manufacturing plant. It tells every system in the body when it is time to work and when it is time to shut down for maintenance. This foreman takes its cues mostly from light. For hundreds of thousands of years, the only light human beings saw after dinner was the soft orange glow of a fire, and then total darkness. When it gets dark, a tiny gland in the center of your brain starts pumping out melatonin. Melatonin is the chemical signal that tells the factory to power down. It tells your heart rate to drop, your blood pressure to lower, and your brain to prepare for the deep cleaning cycle. When you look at a cell phone in a dark room, you are blasting your eyes with concentrated, high-frequency blue light. Laura explained this to me in a way I could not ignore. She said that blue light hits your retinas, and your primitive brain instantly thinks it is high noon in the middle of the Arizona desert. The foreman slams on the emergency brake. The melatonin production stops instantly. Your brain starts screaming at your body to wake up, be alert, and get ready to work. I would put the phone down, close my eyes, and wonder why I was lying there staring at the ceiling for an hour. My brain had been chemically tricked, and even worse, every time that phone vibrated or lit up with an email or a message, it kept my nervous system on high alert. You cannot fall into deep, restorative sleep if your subconscious thinks it has to stand guard duty. I was creating my own exhaustion. The solution was not a negotiation. It had to be a strict rule. I call it the 6-foot rule, but honestly, out of the room is better. I bought a cheap, analog, battery-powered alarm clock at the hardware store for $8. It does not connect to the internet. It just tells the time and rings a bell. My cell phone now charges in the kitchen overnight. And more importantly, I instituted a golden hour. 1 full hour before I intend to go to sleep, that phone is plugged in and ignored. No checking the news, no looking at messages. I read a paper book under a warm yellow lamp. I let my brain understand that the day is actually over. The first few nights I felt anxious, like I was missing something important. That is just withdrawal from the constant stimulation. By the 4th night, I fell asleep in 15 minutes, and I stayed asleep. But getting the phone out of the bedroom did not solve everything, because right next to where the phone used to be was the second item I had to banish: the digital alarm clock radio. I'd owned this particular clock since the 1980s. It had big, glowing red numbers that stared at me from the nightstand. I always thought it was comforting to be able to open an eye in the dark and know exactly what time it was. I was completely wrong. That glowing clock was the source of my worst nocturnal anxiety. Here is what happens when you are over 60. You are going to wake up in the middle of the night. It is a biological reality. A joint will ache, a neighbor's dog will bark, or you will just shift positions and open your eyes. The very first thing I would do out of pure instinct was turn my head and look at those glowing red numbers. It would say 3:14 in the morning, and instantly the math would begin in my head. I would calculate that I had only been asleep for 4 hours. I would calculate that I only had 3 hours left before the sun came up. I would tell myself that if I did not fall back asleep right this second, tomorrow was going to be a miserable, exhausting disaster. That mental math is a trap. The moment you start worrying about not sleeping, you trigger your sympathetic nervous system. That is your fight or flight response. Your body thinks it is under attack, so it dumps cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. Your heart rate speeds up. Your blood pressure rises. You are literally preparing your body to fight a physical threat, but you are just lying under the covers getting mad at a piece of plastic. This is called sleep performance anxiety. The more you look at the clock, the more anxious you get. The more anxious you get, the less you can sleep. It is a vicious, miserable loop, and that digital clock is the judge handing down the sentence every time you look at it. You do not need to know what time it is in the middle of the night. If the alarm hasn't gone off, it is still time to sleep. That is the only information you need. I took that old digital clock and I physically turned it around. I faced the glowing numbers toward the wall. It still works. It still wakes me up at 6 in the morning, but now when I wake up in the dark, I cannot see the time. I have removed the temptation to do the destructive mental math. I do not know if it is 2 in the morning or 5 in the morning, and that ignorance is a blessing. Without the clock judging me, my mind stays calm, my heart rate stays low, and 9 times out of 10 I slide right back into sleep without even trying. The third item I had to get rid of was the hardest one to accept because it was something that gave me an immense amount of physical comfort. It was the electric heated blanket. In the winter months, even here in Arizona, the desert gets cold at night. When you have miles on your joints like I do, the cold settles deep into your bones. Getting under an electric blanket turned up to high felt like stepping into a hot bath. It melted the aches in my knees and lower back. I would leave it on all night long, thinking I was doing my body a favor by keeping it warm and loose. I was actually sabotaging the most fundamental mechanical requirement for deep sleep. My son Daniel explained the plumbing of it to me. To reach the deepest, most restorative stages of sleep, your core body temperature physically has to drop. It needs to drop by about 2 degrees Fahrenheit. It is a biological signal that has been hardwired into us since we were sleeping in caves. It tells the brain that the environment is cool, the day is done, and it is safe to begin the heavy maintenance work. Daniel told me to think of my body like the engine of a heavy-duty truck. You run it hard all day, it generates a lot of heat. When you park it in the garage at night, you cannot do the delicate maintenance work while the engine block is still burning hot. You have to let it cool down so the mechanics can get their hands in there and fix what is broken. When I left that electric blanket running all night, I was keeping the engine artificially hot. My body was desperately trying to cool itself down. It was pushing blood to my skin, making me sweat, fighting against the heat I was wrapping myself in. Because my core temperature could not drop, my sleep stayed shallow. I never reached the deep, slow-wave sleep where tissue is repaired and the immune system is rebuilt. I would wake up feeling dehydrated, restless, and completely unrefreshed, despite lying in bed for 8 hours. I didn't throw the blanket in the trash. I just changed how I used it. I started a routine I call the preheat and unplug. About half an hour before I get into bed, I turn the electric blanket on high. It warms up the sheets, takes the chill out of the mattress, and creates a perfectly warm nest for my tired joints. But the absolute second I physically sit down on the edge of the bed to get under the covers, I turn it off. And I don't just use the clicker. I reach down and unplug it from the wall. This ensures no residual electricity keeps the coils warm. I get the immediate comfort of the heat to help my muscles relax and let me fall asleep. But as the night progresses, the bed naturally cools down. My core temperature drops, just like it is supposed to, and my brain gets the green light to go into deep repair mode. If I get cold in the early morning hours, I just keep an extra heavy wool blanket folded at the foot of the bed that I can pull up. Your body heat trapped under a natural blanket is far better than constant artificial heat baking you all night. The fourth item on this list is the one that shocks most people. It shocked me because every doctor, every magazine, and every health show constantly preaches about it. They tell you to hydrate. They tell you water is life. So for years, I kept a tall, clear glass of water sitting right on my nightstand. I thought it was the healthiest habit in the world. If I woke up, I would take a sip. If my throat was dry, I would take a gulp. But keeping that glass of water next to the bed was the direct cause of my fragmented sleep. There is a medical term called nocturia, which is just a fancy way of saying you have to get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. After age 60, our bladders are not what they used to be, and our kidneys function a little differently at night. I assumed getting up 2 or 3 times a night was just part of the aging contract I had signed. I did not understand the catastrophic damage those bathroom trips were doing to my brain's recovery cycle. Sleep does not work like a light switch. It is not just on or off. Sleep works in cycles, like a heavy freight train leaving a station. It takes about 90 minutes for that train to build up speed, travel through light sleep, enter the deep physical repair stages, go into the dream states where memories are organized, and then coast back into the station. You need 4 or 5 of those complete, uninterrupted journeys every night to stay healthy. When you wake up at 2 in the morning because your bladder is full, it is like somebody pulling the emergency brake on that moving freight train. The journey completely stops. You get out of bed, turn on a light, walk to the cold bathroom, and relieve yourself. When you get back into bed, you do not just resume the journey where you left off. The train has to back all the way up to the starting station and begin the entire 90-minute process from zero. If you do this 3 times a night, you never spend enough consecutive time in the deepest stages of sleep. Your muscles don't heal. Your memories don't consolidate. You are starving your brain of the maintenance time it needs to stave off cognitive decline. And the trigger for this was sitting right next to my head. Every time I woke up for a brief moment, maybe from a noise outside or just shifting positions, I would see that glass of water. Out of pure habit, I would reach over and take a sip. Just a sip at midnight, another little sip at 2 in the morning. It seemed harmless. But those sips added up. They guaranteed that 90 minutes later my bladder would be full enough to wake me up entirely. It was a self-inflicted wound. The solution was a complete shift in my daily routine. I call it front-loading my hydration. From the moment I wake up until the late afternoon, I drink water constantly. I keep a big jug on the kitchen counter, and I make sure it is empty by dinner time. But at 6 o'clock in the evening, the water faucet gets shut off tightly. I stop drinking large amounts of liquids. I avoid heavy soups for dinner, and I definitely avoid any tea or decaf coffee in the evening. If I have to take a medication at night, I take it with the tiniest sip of water possible, just enough to get the pill down. And right before my head hits the pillow, I go to the bathroom and empty the tank completely, even if I don't feel a strong urge to go. I took the glass of water off the nightstand entirely. By removing it, I broke the habit. If I wake up at night and my mouth is dry, I just swallow, turn over, and close my eyes. The saliva comes back in a minute or two. Once I implemented this 6 o'clock cutoff and removed the glass from my room, I went from waking up 3 times a night to sleeping straight through until sunrise. That single change gave me hours of deep, uninterrupted sleep back. The 5th and final item I had to remove was the sneakiest of them all. It is a product of the modern world, and it was turning my bedroom into a slow-drip torture chamber for my nervous system. I'm talking about the Wi-Fi router and the absolute army of tiny blinking electronic lights that came with it. We live in a world where everything we plug into a wall has an indicator light. I had my internet router sitting on a dresser in my bedroom because the technician told me it would give the house the best signal. That box sat there 24 hours a day, blinking a bright green LED light every single second. But it wasn't just the router. It was the little red standby light on the television. It was the orange light on the power strip under the bed. It was the glowing blue display on the air purifier. Individually, these lights seem tiny. You think they don't matter because you sleep with your eyes closed. But your eyelids are thin. Your brain, specifically that foreman looking for light to stop melatonin production, is incredibly sensitive. Think of it like trying to sleep in the woods, and there is a wolf walking around the perimeter of your camp, stepping on dry branches. You might have your eyes closed, but your primitive brain hears every snap. It stays vigilant. It refuses to drop its guard and let you sink into vulnerability. Those blinking electronic lights do the exact same thing. They create a persistent fog of low-grade light pollution. The rhythmic blinking of a router is a constant subliminal signal to your brain that the environment is not entirely dark, and therefore not entirely safe. It whispers to your nervous system all night long, "Stay alert, stay alert, stay alert." This chronic light exposure, even faint light, is scientifically linked not just to terrible sleep, but to insulin resistance, weight gain around the middle, and severe hormonal imbalances. When your circadian rhythm is broken by light pollution, your metabolic hormones like insulin and cortisol go completely haywire. I executed a protocol in my house that I call total blackout. One night, I turned off the main bedroom light, closed the blinds, and just stood in the middle of the room for 2 minutes, letting my eyes adjust. It was horrifying. My bedroom looked like the cockpit of a commercial airliner. There were little lights glowing in every corner. I took action the next day. I moved the Wi-Fi router completely out of the bedroom and put it in the hallway closet. It still works fine, but the blinking green light is gone. Then I bought a roll of black electrical tape at the hardware store. I walked around the room and put a tiny square of black tape over every single LED light I could find. I taped the television standby light. I taped the power strips. I taped the air purifier display. I left absolutely zero artificial light sources visible. And for the light I could not control, the streetlights bleeding through the edges of the curtains or the early morning sun, I swallowed my pride and bought a high-quality sleep mask. Not a cheap airline throwaway, but a contoured mask that physically blocks 100% of the light from reaching my eyes. The combination of taping the LEDs and wearing that mask turned my bedroom back into what it was evolutionarily supposed to be. A dark, silent cave. A true sanctuary. When I woke up after that first week of total blackout, without the cell phone, without the glowing clock, without the heating blanket baking me, and without waking up to use the bathroom, I felt something I had not felt in 10 years. I felt sharp. I felt present. I sat on the edge of the bed, and I immediately remembered what I needed to do that day. I remembered the names of my grandkids. The heavy, wet concrete fog in my head had evaporated. After you cross 60, the margin for error in how you treat your body gets incredibly narrow. The things that used to be minor inconveniences become massive roadblocks to your health. Your bedroom is not an entertainment center. It is not an office. It is the only place in the world where your body can perform the deep, critical maintenance required to keep your mind intact and your organs functioning. If you fill it with flashing lights, stressful clocks, and artificial heat, you are robbing your own bank account. Do not accept memory loss and bone-deep exhaustion as the standard cost of getting older. Your body still knows how to heal itself, and your brain still knows how to clean itself. You just have to get out of its way. Take back control of your bedroom tonight. Make the changes I made. You might be surprised at how much life you still have left to live when you actually give yourself the chance to rest. The independence you want tomorrow is protected by the small, quiet choices you make tonight. This is Harold Bennett. Start tonight and take care of yourselves.